everybody. Welcome back. Thank you so much for making time to be with us today. We have an outstanding show for you today. You are going to love our guests as much as we do. We are going to be having a conversation about George Floyd, Black Lives Matter, police reform, public safety, and everything in the spaces in between. So we are joined by two very fabulous guests today, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves. So Cole, tell us who you are, let the people know where they might recognize you from, and a little bit about how you spend your days.
Sure. Hi, everybody. First of all, Hagir and Heather, thank you for having me on. And Michael, it's great to be on with you as well. As Heather said, my name is Cole Goodman. I currently represent Dauphin County in the Democratic Party, and I also serve on the executive board of the Pennsylvania State Democratic Party. But also in this past year, I have, well, my whole life I have, but especially since the murder of George Floyd, I've really taken to activism and on-street activism and Black Lives Matter activism and social justice activism. So I think my tally now is since the George Floyd murder, have had the honor of attending and speaking and advocating at 73 protests. So across Dauphin County, Cumberland County, all of Pennsylvania, even in some places where, let's just say, the reception wasn't so friendly. But I also take a huge passion in we can get out in the streets all we want and protest for social justice and police reform, which is very important. But if we don't get it done legislatively, I believe personally for generations, it will all be for nothing, and future generations will be fighting the same battles that we're fighting today. So I take a huge passion in especially being on executive board, working with state representatives and legislators in really pushing police reform, especially through the legislature of Pennsylvania, which we can talk about, I'm sure we will talk about in the show. So that's a little about me. I am so happy to be on, and I'm really excited for a wonderful discussion today.
Beautiful. Great answer. Powerful. Okay, we have got Commissioner Muldrow with us today. Tell the people a little bit about themselves. I'm sure they'll recognize you from social media as well, but give them a little bit of insight into who you are.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. Thank you for having me with Mr. Cole and your esteemed hostesses. So I appreciate being here. My name is Michael Muldrow. I am, as you said, the commissioner with the York City Police Department. I am definitely a York person, so I can't really claim anything outside of this community or outside of this area. My background is very, as my brother always jokingly says, very localized because I've paid my dues, I guess you would say, and cut my teeth right here in this community. I am a York person, born and bred. I am a second generation police officer here in the department that I now lead proudly, and a family full of public servants. My mom was the mayor's personal secretary through several mayors. My aunt was the superintendent of schools, and my brother was one of the first Naval Academy graduates to come out of York High as a Black man, and now retired Commander Muldrow. I am 20 years law enforcement, married, 5 kids, and proudly had an opportunity to come back here and serve both in the school district, where I led the department for 13 years, and now back with the York City Police Department, where my career started, where I am trying to embody doing things a little differently. I'm trying to show that a police department, the role of policing can function in a very heartful way, a very community-focused way, and that the job can be accomplished without some of the hate, some of the issues, and some of the division that it's promoted or unintentionally caused in the past. So I'm proud to be here. I'm always excited to be able to talk to people about what I do and the platform that police work has provided me throughout the years. And I'm looking forward to the conversation today.
Love it. Love it. First, thank you for everything you do and raising awareness and just being out there with the community. And even you are saying you're just in New York, but your voice reach us here in Harrisburg, Mechanicsburg, you reach everywhere. And just thank you for doing that. I'm going to just have you start from where you end. How are we, like, what is going on? Why there is division and what's the problem? And you just mentioned that we are trying, or you're trying to educate the police about their job and the public about what they can do. How did we get here?
I think as a whole, how we got here was with walls and lines in the sand. Everybody, we lost our way along the road of where we were supposed to have been going. I look back at things just as a young cop, as a young police officer, and I remember the first time I took an oath. And when you think about that oath and the fact that you raised your hand and you swore to be part of a community and represent a community, and you understood that you were being empowered by a community to serve in a capacity that was supposed to keep it safe and be the thing that kept its customs and its norms flowing the way that they saw fit to have those things go. And somewhere, I mean, just reflecting and looking at, just taking an internal look at what we did or didn't do in law enforcement, somewhere along the way, we just got a little off track and started seeing the job as something separate, started seeing the goal as something divided, started to think that we represented the job rather than representing the people. And I think that caused us to be very aloof, very standoffish, and start to miss the mark on some of the way that we functioned collectively as a profession. And we stopped doing the things that we needed to do to build bonds, to establish ourselves as part of the communities that we all served. And with that, you started to see some of the relationships start to break and some of the divides start being created. And from there was just so many, from what I see, there's just so many other elements at play that kind of jumped in and helped to keep that festering, whether it was the media, the movies, some of the outlooks, some of the hills and battles that we had fought and caused in the past, and continuing just to make lines in the sand. And next thing you know, people started to lose the trust. Some of the confidence started to corrode, and some of that belief that people used to have, that thing that used to make little kids say, want to put a little badge on their chest and say they wanted to be a cop or dressed up in a uniform and want to be the quote unquote good guy. Some of that just started to slip. And as it was slipping and corroding, we didn't stop as a profession. We didn't stop and do the things that we needed to do to try to slow that down, to try to change that narrative. Rather than doing that, we got defensive. And along the way, being defensive on our side just kind of gave root to people being defensive on the other side. And then next thing you know, you just had this gigantic wall that was created that in some ways made us forget how to be people, and made the people forget that we were part of them. It's my take.
Oh my God, there is like a lot. You just give me a whole load of information that I have a lot to say about, but Cole.
Could you repeat the question, please?
Did you hear what Michael was saying about?
I did.
Yeah,
I did.
So what is your response to that? To me,
How did we get here?
Yeah, and the oath, like you know, I always say that, Michael, like as a nurse, as any profession, doctors, and I said that last week, I say it every week, we took an oath to serve and protect. And at no point in my life that I felt that my patient are threat enough for me to feel like the need to kill them, choke them, or do bad. Because we took an oath, like you said. That's the first thing. The second thing that you said that really caught my attention is, how we or the police became this one united country, or whatever you call it, a body that protect each other regardless. Even when my family do wrong, I'm not going to stand by them. I'm going to correct them. I'm going to tell them they're wrong. And that build up of like, this is our body, either you're in or you're out, and looking at everybody else who is criticizing or trying to correct as an outsider. I think, I agree with you. Those, to me, were the main issues that, if we address the problem as a community, that we need to fix the relationship and bridge the gap, or build a new bridge between us and this new body that created. We want that body to open up and to start, not treating it as, oh, this is one bad cop. Just like if you buy a whole basket of, onion, and there is a rotten one, if you don't take it out, it's going to mess up the whole batch you have. So we have some responsibility as a community, and the police department have the same responsibility. Go ahead, Cole. I just give you time to think of what you want to say.
So that analogy that you were going off of, I think is very interesting, because a lot of people, I hear a lot of the, one bad apple type analogy. But whenever anyone brings that analogy up to me, especially in our more rural parts of the state, I always ask them, yes, there are bad apples, but when are we going to start questioning the tree itself? So this goes into the question that you posed, how did we get here? I actually think we've always been here, but things are now being filmed. Things are now being caught on camera at an instant notice, and is shared across the entire country. That's one very huge difference, I think, to answering that question. This has always been going on. And as people so eloquently point out, I'm a youngin'. But when I talk to my parents about it as well, they say the same exact thing. And my mom's an individual who is from the deep, deep South of this country, and had to sit at colored only counters and sip out of colored only water fountains. And she says, dealing with the police there are some things that have gotten better, but there are just a lot of things that are very similar from the 60s to now. So how did we get here? The Commissioner Muldrow brings up a very good point, in that the trust in the community between and across, I'll say, Pennsylvania, between the police and the community is almost completely eroded. I mean, when I walk, I can speak on Harrisburg because I live in Harrisburg. When I walk on Allison Hill, the P-Funk, the projects, the one thing I literally hear the most is F12. I mean, just repeatedly. And I think, and I'm sure this will be a discussion that we'll have on the show. How do we fix that? How do we get to a point of fixing that? And I think that starts with a sense of accountability from police institutions and police leadership. It will never begin the healing process unless accountability starts being had. And I can speak when the protests were going on in this state of Pennsylvania. Definitely, I'm sure not in York, Commissioner Muldrow, and you can speak to that better than I can. But the state FOP, police departments across the state, especially in our more rural areas, became a direct contradiction, or strive to be a direct contradiction to Black Lives Matter and social justice, by creating these narratives like thin blue line and blue lives, when there's really no such thing as blue lives, because it's a profession. You choose to go into that profession. And I saw it as a contradiction of Black lives. So that goes to my whole point. It seems like police departments, not all, but many, are going in the wrong direction of standing for not just human rights, but social justice. And I think a huge step forward would be partnering hand in hand and saying, I understand we have a problem. How can we fix this problem? How can we keep public safety at priority, but also make sure that Black and brown bodies aren't being targeted in the process? So that was a very long answer to your question, Hagir, but that's a wonderful question.
Heather.
I think what you guys are both kind of touching on, and what the commissioner was saying too, is if there is an erosion, my question is the accountability on the part of the public? Is it our job to hold you guys accountable? If you can feel that erosion and you can see the degradation, and you maybe have been a part of it and noted it as it was happening, how do the, for lack of a better term, the police themselves? Because I don't think that's been working.
I guess my response or my answer to it would be, I still think we have to be careful of looking at the who caused it first, or which side needs to which side is it more necessary to do the extending or do the bending. I think just somebody needs to step up. I think somebody needs to just be humble enough to say, I'm going to reach out first. I'm going to go beyond the F-12. I'm going to go beyond I hate the police. I'm going to go beyond the surface of how people seem like they feel about the profession, about the career that I chose. I'm going to get beyond the angst and not take it so personal, and extend myself to be the first person to reach out. And that's what, that's been my goal. Like, I can't speak for anybody else. I don't really speak for anybody else, but that's been my goal in this role as a leader in law enforcement, I guess you would say, is to be if somebody needs to be the person that's willing to put their ego aside and just say, okay, I'm sorry, and let's talk about it. That's been what I've been trying to do. So for the past 5 months, getting beyond that, getting beyond some of those divisions, getting beyond some of that initial superficial angst, and reaching out, because even before, in my opinion, even before accountability is relationship. And I think that goes far further, because the relationships, the reason why things are different for me, and I'm out multiple days a week, every week in the street by myself with other people, running with a badge on, with a gun, no vest, whatever. I go everywhere I want to go and do what I want to do, because I'm still a grown man and I'm from York, and I'm never going to be afraid of my own blocks. So I'm in the street all the time, and I don't get the reaction from people that we're talking about. They know that I am still the same guy that I've always been. I'm still the same guy that I always was. I speak my mind, whether I'm in the station. I speak my mind, whether I'm on the street. I speak my mind, whether I'm on a show like this. I'm always going to be that same one person. And I think that being exposed like that, being vulnerable like that, being willing to have those conversations, regardless or no matter how difficult the conversations may be, is the thing that starts to bridge those gaps. And people know when they get to me, when they talk sense to me, when they share things with me, that I'm going to act on those things. And that's the thing that's building trust. And the part that I've enjoyed is, even in a relatively short time of 5 months, it's not just building trust and restoring trust and confidence in me. It's turned into a bit of positive equity and goodwill for everybody that wears this patch, that functions in this department down here. And they're starting to give people, at the very least, the benefit of the doubt. Now, what those officers do with that afterwards is on them. And when that ship goes awry or they crash and burn with it, that's when it's my job to step up and hold them accountable.
And not so many, I'm sorry, Heather, not so many people do hold their officers accountable. I think that's where we at right now. I just want to say something, and it's my own personal opinion, that as a professional, when I go to my job, I'm one person working in the hospital among other nurses and doctors and etc. We don't ask our patient to behave or we will harm them. We are the professionals. We're the one who's supposed to be trained to control our anger, to control our emotion, and know that every patient that comes to this hospital need to be treated with the same dignity, respect, regardless of their color, sex, ethnicity, etc. So I think the biggest problem is teaching, training. And I'm going to ask you later on the training, the amount of training that cops get. I had 4 years of training at the hospital. And during that training, I had extensive mental health tests. I had extensive criminal background tests. I had training to deal with all the situation that the patient could be combative. It could be someone with any kind of mental illness. It could be someone who's just a jerk. And I need to learn that this is my job. I'm going to treat you with respect and do my job to make sure that you are healthy and you're leaving the hospital in a better shape than when you entered it, regardless if I agree with you or disagree. And I think that's the first problem, that the police as a body expect the whole country to come and reach out. I am willing to reach out. Cole is willing to reach out. I'm sure Heather is willing to reach out, but who are we going to reach out to? And who can we start this process with? I know I can reach out to you in York. How about Hampden here, Cumberland County? I mean, many counties. So is it easier for the department as a body to reach out, or for citizens just like you, Heather and I, or Cole, to go try to spend time to get to know who is the right person to reach out to? And how am I going to approach you? I'm going to just say, hey, I'm a concerned citizen. I want to do this. I don't have that trust that if I go there, I won't be shot or killed or whatever. So that's another thing we need to put in our mind when we talk about connecting and who can start. But again, I am willing to do my part. I am willing to do whatever to try to fix this problem, because I hate to see more kids, unarmed people being killed and shot for no good reason. The other thing that we did with the human trafficking, for example, and it worked fine. We start doing classes with them, teach them what signs they need to look for. Can we do that? Like, is that one of the things that if I come to you as a citizen, Michael, you will take that in account and help me, help you treat us the way that we should be treated? Did that make sense to you?
It absolutely did. And I think I'll start. I want to start with one of the things you said in the middle. And if you see me, I'm just scribbling because I don't want to forget things. But you had said in the middle about the onus being on, who's the onus on to take that first step. And I would say, and I would challenge any of the other law enforcement leaders. And I know, just because in Harrisburg, Chief Carter is one of my mentors. So I know that he's a person that would have absolutely no problem stepping up to that challenge. I know Chief Landis in Carlisle would have absolutely no problem stepping up to that challenge. But I think that it is easier for us to extend that hand. It is easier for us to step up in law enforcement and be the first to reach out, because we hadn't been the side, if you will, for lack of a better way to say it, that has seen problems. We haven't been the side that's been victimized. So I do think that it's on us to step up and reach out. It was so many things in so many ways. One of the biggest things we talk about all the time in police work is the diminishing level or diminishing numbers of individuals who are signing up to apply for the profession in general. And I think all of that's all in the same ball of wax. We're not doing the things that we need to do to reach back out to the community to attract them to want to partner with us and be a part of what we're doing to protect the community. And to the other point, I just wanted to throw out there that we were talking about was like when you were talking about comparing like the nursing profession to the law enforcement profession. I think that's one of the biggest intentional changes that I've been trying to focus on. It's also one of the biggest hurdles or one of the greatest difficulties that law enforcement professionals, particularly leaders, older leaders, have right now. You got to remember that the difference between a law enforcement, a criminal justice job, and a medical job is for so many years, for a lifetime, it had been portrayed, it had been the training, all the elements of it, it was looked at as a combat-oriented profession. It's the reason why they give so many extra points in recruitment to people that had been in the military versus civilians that had been in college or come just a neighborhood man, a guy or girl that came into the profession and said, hey, I want to serve my community. They were combat-oriented jobs, para-professional. And that had been the focus for so long, hence the crew cuts, the high and tights, the military uniform, the gig lines, the standing at attention. And you were breeding a culture that was very paramilitary. I mean, not paraprofessional, very paramilitary. And the difference now is the things that you'll start to see, hopefully trending across the country. I know it's my outlook is a little different because I was raised in this job differently. To me, from how my dad taught me to do the job, because I was helping my neighbors, I was helping the people that I grew up with. To me, it's always been a social service job. It's never been about being a combat-oriented job. So that's one of the mindset changes, one of the hurdles that we need to make across the board as a profession. And if we're able to make that transition and start seeing it as a social service oriented job versus a combat, a paramilitary oriented job, you'll start to see different people drawn to the profession, and you'll start to see different results coming from our policies, our practices, and the individuals that are doing the jobs.
I think what I'm hearing, at least, and you guys can tell me what you think, is I'm hearing that there is a problem and then there are solutions. But until you actually take the knife completely out of someone's back, you can't start to actually tend to the wound. And so I'm trying to just envision what are the mechanisms in place to help stop the damage, to stop, is it defund the police? What do you think about that? Is there a mechanism in place? Like, for example, I'm a real estate agent. If I install a sign wrong, there's an entire mechanism in place within the state of Pennsylvania to punish me. Yeah. And my broker, she's been doing this for 35 years. You can still look up the time that she installed a sign wrong as a real estate agent 20 years ago. It is still on her record. So what is the equivalent of that? Where is the accountability? What's the mechanism to make sure that there's a satisfying solution to people that aren't going to be ready to be where you're at in the same headspace, for the people that have been militarized and they might be coming from this place of authority that's damaging?
And I think that's a great question. And honestly, I would contend that the mechanisms are there. And I here's my take on it is everybody has somebody that can hold them accountable. And when you're a child, you have your mom. Your mom holds you accountable, tells you what you need to do, when you need to go to bed, what medicine you need to take, so on and so forth. And if you don't do it, you know there's going to be consequences. If you're the president, ultimately, like we just saw, you have the people. And like for me, as a police leader, I have the mayor, I have our city council that I'm accountable to. So the police officers, police officers aren't the be all to end all. We all have government officials over top of us, whether you're a borough, whether you're a city, whether you're a township, we all have government officials that are over top of us who can hold us accountable, who can remove us from our role, who can proceed with hiring and firing, who make determinations on what they want to see working and wearing their uniform and what they feel is socially acceptable. I think that's a piece of the conversation that can't be forgotten. It's easy to jump into politics and say we support, we're about the people, but man, when those same individuals are the people that can hold us accountable when we're wrong and don't, there's also some burden that needs to be carried. I just think that that's a very very necessary piece of this conversation because we all have bosses.
Like you might have a boss, but you don't have to answer this. I mean, Cole might answer it, but I know who's going to hold me accountable if I do something. Heather is the same. Cole is the same way. But who, beside the George Floyd case, the verdict, and I'm talking about the case. I mean the verdict. I don't talk about the murder. Beside that, there were few cases that we held the police accountable for their action. And like this sign behind me, we see police get away with murder. You might not agree, or you might not agree to this, but statistically speaking, I don't see good numbers. So to me, you could have laws in place, just like anything else. You cannot discriminate against someone when they apply for a job. But to enforce it, that's the question. What do you think, Cole?
Yeah, so wow, great points being brought up. I think that I think accountability has been, and not just accountability, but in many points, justice has been incredibly lacking when it comes to police and police departments across the country. It just, it brings me back in my head to a place of individuals like Sandra Blonde, who was detained and was detained in police custody, and then just mysteriously dies, 3 days later, and absolutely no, at least from last I saw, I could be corrected, but last I saw, no charges towards any of the police officers that arrested her, or accountability for the jail that she was in. And that's
You're right. There is none.
Yeah,
up to this point, there is none.
That's a whole other aspect that we haven't even gotten to, the jail and the penal system in the United States. But so I think that it has been very lacking. One thing that Commissioner Muldrow said that I agree with is that accountability will continue to be lacking if we don't elect people with the mindset of, if a police officer or anyone in law enforcement does do something wrong, then we have to put pathways and laws on the books to hold them accountable. So, for example, I think in Pennsylvania, we've done a really good job right after the protest were going on, and Hagir knows, we talked about this on the Capitol steps, like
Yeah.
right when it happened. HB 1841 was passed in the legislature, and HB 1910 was passed. One requires mental health evaluations for law enforcement officers throughout Pennsylvania, and the other requires a background check, and a background check that is tracking in an electronic database, which is very, very important, because a police officer could do, could do something wrong in one county and then move over to another county, and that county didn't even know that even happened. So Commissioner Muldrow, you're right. I think the sense of accountability, and this can go back to our first question, it can't just come from within the police departments. It has to come from within our legislatures and within our city halls too. And there are some cities in the United States, I'm originally from New Orleans, I can say this, there are some cities in the United States where archaic police departments who have archaic thinking are paired alongside elected officials that are in on that type of thinking, and then you get absolutely no accountability, or no, when something bad happens, no justice. So that's a very critical part in passing legislation for pathways to hold officers accountable, not just in Pennsylvania, but across the country.
Heather.
Again, I think that like Derek Chauvin wasn't turned in by his fellow officers. The people in his department didn't feel outraged at it. You're right when you talk about this camaraderie, this brotherhood that doesn't exist in other professions. And so I think that's where I just in terms of having public trust, I don't think there is any, that the police can police themselves. Does that make sense to you? And when bills like what Cole is talking about pass, do they pass in a way that the people you work with, your fellow police officers, understand what they're and think they're useful and are appreciative of them? Or is there hesitation whenever new things are imposed upon them?
And before you answer, Michael, to add to Heather's, you know, I don't want people to feel, and I said that last week, and I want to repeat it again because it's important. I don't want people to feel we think the police are our enemies, or it's either you are against the police or you're with them. You can actually have two thoughts in your mind at the same time. You know, as a person, you're not only supposed to have one thought and you're done. You can like having your family member keeping their job, and you can want it to protect them and want it to be there for them. But at the same time, you want to tell them there's something wrong in the foundation, or there's something wrong on the structure that we need to fix. And I think if we all understand that we're not coming at you or to you saying you're the enemy, we're saying the whole system is wrong, maybe there is not enough training. And there is an author named Rosa, and she was a police officer, and then she became something else. But she said the training, it was like for her was 8 weeks, where she was exposed to gun for a short period of time, and then you get a PowerPoint, and you're supposed to hold that gun. Some never use the gun in their life, and you're taught that you have to protect yourself. Everyone is an enemy. You use your own, what did Fetterman say on our show last week? Your own, on your own discretion or judgment, which that's the problem I have. So, you know, by any means, we are trying to fix a problem. We're not trying to create a division or a problem. Go ahead, Michael.
Oh, no problem. I paused to say this. I'm good. I'm good with conversations like this because I started out in a barbershop. So if I can't debate my opinion, it's not much of an opinion in the first place. So I'm here for it. Let's do it. What I would start by saying first, the thing that I would challenge is the notion that this is the only career path or only career field that sticks up for itself, that bonds this way in this collegial fashion. I spent 13 years working in a school district, and I can absolutely tell you that there is no more compelling or stronger set of individuals than the teachers union. They will come together, they will fight you tooth and nail, and they will hold steadfast against anything coming from the outside. I believe my wife's in healthcare. It's the same thing in healthcare. I see it with the attorneys that work in the district attorney's office. I see it with the local media and how the reporters and the network of people that are reporters are, even with something as simple as publicists, they all know each other and they all stick together and will look to defend their field. So that's one notion that I think that mechanics stick with mechanics. When I was a barber, we all stuck together, knew each other, and didn't want people talking about barbers. So I think
if I may, whenever a teacher is inappropriate with a child, I've never seen the other teachers come together. They kind of say you were wrong and they kick them out. When a doctor is accused of malpractice, the other doctors don't bind together and try to stop that doctor from being sued. They will say you did something wrong and they let them go. It's not a fraternity-like feel, if you understand what I'm trying to say.
I hear it, but there was legislation passed even with respect to reporting in school districts that went out and up to make sure that it limited the covering of institutional abuses that happened. Hence, what you saw at Penn State. It's inherently been there, and that's why the legislation, like Cole talked about, is so important, because you need somebody from the outside to push in, somebody that's higher from the outside to often push in and leverage some of the right things that you need to do, because people tend to struggle to take their own medicine.
Do you see that question from Bill? Oh, sorry, Paul, go ahead.
Oh, no,
And
no,
Heather, you can read the question.
I was just going to quickly say, I just want to quickly say that, Commissioner, I kind of want to just go a little bit deeper on this point, in that what I found absolutely astounding, and let me be clear, not from all the law enforcement community, but I would very much say a majority, is when the BLM protests started and there were thousands of people in the streets. And what I saw, and I don't want to say over there, because I don't want to keep pushing, a divide, because I do think we need to come together. But what I saw was from another section of people with different viewpoint towards this issue, many of whom, and I'm seeing if you agree or disagree on this, created a whole new narrative of Blue Lives Matter to completely contradict Black Lives Mattering, which, that for me, that's not even a controversial phrase. We're not saying Black lives are, which I think they are, but kings and queens and such, just Black Lives Matter. But we saw from many in the law enforcement community a complete contradiction just made up that was conveniently even more pushed during this past summer's protest. So I agree with both of you, in the sense of, I think, Commissioner, you're correct. There are other professions where people do stick together, and you do see that. But I kind of see it to a whole other level in the law enforcement community, so much so that many are creating contradictions to human rights and social justice. And I'd love to get your thoughts on that, if you wouldn't mind.
I think a piece that can't be forgotten is that whole, when all of that was occurring, when all that was taking place, when all those conversations were being had, there was so much about that was convenient for people, even outside of law enforcement, to project their politics and their ideals into, that okay, first of all, I was there. Like, I was downtown at Ayers with a t-shirt on. There was no news, there was no press about it, but I was there in the crowd sitting with my people, because before I was a cop, I was a Black guy. I mean, I was born a Black man. I'm going to die a Black man. I'm the son of a Black man. That's my truth. So I was there, because you can't just kill somebody. You can't just kill a Black man in the middle of the street on camera and have it be okay. But at the end of the day, when I started seeing so many things flying around about Blue Lives Matter, with all this kind of stuff, I was seeing individuals that never wore a badge, never wore a uniform, never stood up and took a punch in the face for another human being in their life. And they're wearing shirts and having stickers on the car and saying that they represent me. They don't represent me.
Half of our town, me and Heather, have this, and that doesn't mean the thing that people think when you say Black Lives Matter is it got into their mind that only Black Lives Matter, but the message is Black Lives Matter too, because there is a phrase and a quote before we used, and I'm going to use again, that if your house is on fire, you're not going to call the police department and say, come and spray the whole area. They're going to come and see the place who needed help the most, and they're going to help that. And at this point, it was Black lives that needed attention. And that's a whole another conversation for another day, the BLM, why people are looking at it as an enemy and viewing it as a problem. But continue.
And
Michael,
all
I'm
lives
sorry.
can't matter until Black lives matter. Absolutely. In your point, Hagir, for sure. Very well said.
I think Bill, he is a wrongful conviction advocate. He's watching and he sent a message. Can you read it, Heather?
Yeah, thank you so much, Bill. It says many people don't trust the police because the legislatures have created laws that treat police officers as superior. So from a legislative standpoint, Cole, what do you think? And do you actually feel that way, Commissioner?
Commissioner, you can go on that one first.
He said Cole first, so I wasn't dodging it. I was
seeing who was going to go.
Cole is dodging it.
No, I'm ready.
There is absolutely nothing superior about me as a human being. There's absolutely nothing superior about me being in this role. There is nothing that makes me or any of my colleagues that wear uniforms any better than anybody else on the street in this community. That's what I would first want to just say. I get it that there have been a lot of things put in place, even stuff as simple as your quote unquote protected class of individuals, the way PA law is written, that if you punch the average Joe in the face on the street, it's harassment or a simple assault at best. But if you punch a police officer, a teacher, a doctor, a referee, children and youth worker in the face, it's a felony aggravated assault. So I get that there was intentions that were well-intended things that were put in place to make distinctions about the role that you're doing, because the role is in defense of other people. But that individual, there's absolutely nothing, there's nothing greater about one person over the other. It's funny, I thought it was a great question. It's funny though, because it had been a luxury that police officers enjoyed, like a lot of other professions, that for kind of bled into so many things. It's the reason why it's actually one of your voir dire questions. Are you likely to believe a police officer just because they're a police officer? We had enjoyed it for so many decades that we were considered, because of the fact that we were stepping up to domestically defend people, just like the military enjoys certain benefits and certain comforts and a certain outlook that people have on people in service in the military because of the defense of country.
As you should, if you're doing the job right, as you should.
Well, I think that some of that started to give us a false sense of our own humanity. And I say that, and I'll just pause to kind of tell a little bit of a story. One of the first things, and I was lucky because for me, like I said, I'm second generation. So when I went on as a cop, my dad was actually there. So imagine the critiques, imagine the pulling of coattails, imagine having your parent actually in the profession with you, that whenever he started to see you get off track, he was there to grab you and pull you back in line. So the thing that my dad always told me was, when you were getting in this field and you go to the academy and you go through the weeks, the months of training and mental focus and all the preparatory things that you try to get into a young officer, that you're trying to instill into a person to come out and put their lives on the line to defend other people for things that have nothing to do with them. So just imagine what it takes to get a person ready to do that kind of thing. And then you bring them back and you put them in the field and you start sending them to defend people. You start sending them to deal with other people's problems. You start sending them to stand in the gap for all these things, because regardless of how anybody feels, when a bad thing occurs, we're not calling anybody else other than a cop. So you do all these things to get people moving, to get people motivated to go serve their community and put their lives on the line. And then that officer, the scared puppy that they may have been, they go from call to call, battle to battle, incident to incident, trying to win, trying to control, trying to win. And along the way, after battle after battle, after incident after incident, after skirmish after skirmish, you start to lose focus. You start to lose focus on who you are, why you were there. You start to just see Officer Muldrow, and you start to forget about Mike. You start to forget about who Michael was. Your humanity starts to slip. You start to naturally go somewhere that you didn't intend to go when you first signed up and took that job. And absent somebody or something that's going to grab you and snatch you back in and reel your coattail, reel you in and get you back in line, get you back in touch with that Michael, with that humanity, it creates this false sense of who you are. What you saw with Chauvin, the look on his face embodied what I'm talking about, that jerk mentality that was there on his face, just because the crowd was there, the crowd dared challenge him to take his knee off of somebody's neck. And all it did was empower him to want to go harder and harder and harder. Without somebody that can grab Chauvin, without somebody that can grab a Mike Muldrow, shake him and say, slow down, you do start to lose focus on where you need to be. I'm proud to say I had somebody like that for me. And the thing that the challenge that I've put on myself is that I need to be that for the 100 people that I'm responsible for.
And I think that's the point right here, Muldrow. I don't, like you said, I understand and I know the stress for police officers, the stress of we're expecting them to wear multiple hats. And that's why when we talk about reform and when we talk about demilitarizing, if I can say it right, the police, or when we say, you know, have social workers, have mental health therapists, nurses, people that can respond to those calls and take the weight from the officers, for example, because you cannot wear all these hats, especially with the amount of training you're doing. That's, if we can do that, that's one thing. And I'm going to ask you about the training. But the other thing is holding your partner, someone you see accountable. If the four, was it 4 or 5, Heather and Cole, officers that was standing around Siobhan stood and held them and backed them away from George, we would have been in a different situation right now. George will still be with his family. And the same scenario, you can apply that to the many other unnecessarily shooting. And I do understand that you are put under pressure, but he was not. In Siobhan's case, I didn't even think it should be a trial. I mean, this is just obscene. But holding those people accountable, asking the officers that if they take a stand, they're not going to be punished or penalized or make them feel like you're a traitor. Trying to clear this mentality that either you're with us, bleed blue, or you're with the rest. Try to rethink the main reason that you joined the force, or try to rethink why you're there, to serve the people, just like the president or anybody else. We hold them for a higher standard. We need to hold the police for a higher standard as well. But what amount of training that the police get? And are they getting enough training, or that's something we should think about when we talk to Cole, or bring it to our legislatures, or talk to our senators, and even take it to the president himself?
I'm going to jump forward to that, but I want to jump back to one of the things that you said.
Okay.
About the other 3 or 4 individuals that were there with him, the other people that were there with me when my emotions were getting the best of me in a situation where I wanted to respond in a way that wasn't my norm. The people that I'm around, that I've seen that looked like they were going a little too far, and he needed somebody to grab them and shake them and bring them back to reality. I think that is so important. And the reason why I wanted to jump back into that having that, if we're going to be brothers at arms and comrades at arms and look at it and identify why we're so collegial, then we have to not only be there to pat our buddies on the back, but we also have to be there to tell them, hey, you're going too far, reel it in. And that was one of the things that it's one of the reasons, one of the motivations behind why myself and our department, look, I'm a person that believes in stepping up to challenges. So rather than waiting for legislation to come in and say, look, the recommendations that existed in the 8 can't wait are reforms that all police departments should be making across the country, and you have to do it or we're going to pull your funding. Rather than sitting back waiting for something like that, I saw the benefits in it. Our department saw the benefits in it. And that's the reason why we voluntarily just put ourselves through our paces and made sure that we were in compliance with the 8 can't wait, whether it was a recommendation rather than waiting for it to turn into a mandate. And one of my absolutely most favorite elements to the 8 can't wait was the duty to intervene. And that's exactly what you're talking about. It is now standard practice across the board. And I'm proud to say at 50 West King Street in the York City Police Department, it is now our standard policy that officers have to do what my dad did to me, have to do what you're asking for, what you were asking for one of those other 3 or 4 officers that were there with him to have done. Our officers are responsible now that we have to do it. When we see an officer going too far, we have to step in, or we will be held accountable and be considered just as responsible for the incident that had occurred. And that's been put out to our officers. And whether we all liked it, whether it was easy to stomach, or whether it was a complete, absolute change for everybody that works here, we all knew that it occurred. And it's, I think it was a necessary change, a necessary element. And I believe our community will be better for it.
Welcome, Bill. We can't hear you, Bill.
Oh, okay. Can you
There
hear me
you
now?
go.
right.
Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
You're one of the people that I want to have for a whole show. When you have time, we would love to
Okay,
have
well-
you. But go ahead and talk.
Sure. Just elaborate on what I was talking about in the brief comment was the current animosity between much of the public and police officers. Last year, after the George Floyd incident, Pennsylvania Bikers for Justice put a lot of research into the lack of trust between the community and the police officers. And we found a sense of distrust that was very similar to that of racism. You had this type of feeling between 2 groups, and I'm not saying this is all police officers, but some police officers and some citizens, in which one group looked at the other as inferior and the other resented the other group for making them feel inferior. And the root of that was these laws that label police officers as superior because of the job they do. One of the common things we heard from police officers was referring to themselves as the sheepdogs and the citizens as the sheep. Okay, and this was basically demonstrating their feeling that they were somewhat better than the sheep, and that because they were better, that they should be given certain privileges. They should, get away with certain things. The people seeing this type of attitude by police officers created a lot of animosity. And this has been going on for years. We've spoke with older adults in their 60s and 70s who felt the same way, as well as teenagers in their, early teens. that had, seen this type of superior feelings demonstrated by not all of law enforcement, but some law enforcement. The thin blue line came up a lot as well, which seems to be almost like a secret society for police officers, in which they had their own code, and it was like a world within the world, which the laws didn't apply to them. I could speak so much about this research, but getting really to the root was that years ago, when they started creating these laws, even though well-intended, because of the work that the police officers do to be a protected class, the benefit of that type of law actually created animosity. And the cost was causing lack of trust by the public, and some officers developing this superiority complex because, well, the laws say I'm better than you. And because of that going on and on, it has created decades of animosity, distrust, and like I said earlier, it's very similar to racism, where you have a class of people feeling they're superior to the other class. And the benefit of these laws have not proven to be successful in offering further protection to prevent police officers from being assaulted or shot or lied to or spit on or whatever else that is considered a felony versus a summary offense or a misdemeanor if perpetrated on the average Joe or truck driver, which I had mentioned, because truck drivers actually have a greater rate of fatality in their occupation than police officers do. And to make someone feel that their life is less valuable because of the job they perform is it just makes no sense. So anyway, that's just what I want to elaborate on that. I believe that a starting point would be something called equal justice, in which we go back and try and undo these types of things and create equal laws for everyone. Now, of course, having a more severe offense on harming a disabled person or a child would not be the same as creating different offenses based on someone's occupation. But by having these laws changed to level the playing field and eliminate this distrust caused by making people feel like they're inferior to police officers would be a good start in reestablishing trust.
Thank you very much, Bill. And I'm reading one of your questions here, and I hope Michael can answer or call. I know you asked here, you said, is the benefit of the law favoring police worth the cost? I know we're like over our time, but I would like you to touch on this and maybe answer a few other questions if you don't mind, Michael.
Sorry, my speaker was.
Yes, yeah, I saw that. It's okay.
I think that we have to look at, and I would caution just the belief that quote unquote class, like the way it's written in the law, is there only for police officers. judges, doctors, teachers, like I said, referees. There's a lot of individuals, professions that have been identified that they've put in to keep safe because of the inherent nature of what they do. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if there will be if it wasn't there, if it would make individuals less likely to be compelled to testify on other people's behalves. I don't know if it will make people take a pause in the work that they do, whether it's a police officer, whether it's a judge making a ruling on somebody, an attorney that's pursuing a case, prosecuting a case to get a quote unquote dangerous individual off the street. I don't know. I don't know what the ramifications would be if those protections weren't in place. I just know that because there are protections that are in place, we can't see that as the government valuing us that are in those roles more than they value the people. I just think that we have to be very, very cautious about believing that that's the intended goal. Just because somebody put a vest, professionally gave me a vest for my job, a bulletproof vest for my job, doesn't mean that my life mattered more than somebody else's, or that my life's worth saving more than somebody else's. So I just don't know. I don't know what the ramifications would be if they weren't there. I don't know if it's going to have people even more likely to not pursue careers such as these that are public defense jobs or public service jobs. I don't know. I don't know how a politician would feel if they weren't in that class, if they would be less likely to continue to do the job that they do. I don't know. But like I said, what I do know is we have to not see that as something that separates us and makes us better. And we also have to make sure that we're continuing to be receptive and responsible and do the things that we need to do, particularly as leaders, to make sure that people don't feel the way that Bill just felt. So if those privileges that exist, those protections that exist, if we're not being good stewards over that kind of thing, I think we all need to, in this profession, understand that we could possibly lose it. And so rather than lose it, I think that would be yet another motivation for people to step up and focus on doing the right thing.
What do we need to do as citizens? Heather and I call Bill, anyone listening to us right now, so we obviously wanted to fix the problem and want to build trust and want to correct, reform. We don't want those jobs to lose, the protection that they have, but at the same time, we want them to be held accountable. So what can we do to fix that?
I think one, demand more out of us, demand more out of your leadership. I think that's a great start, whether it's at this level, the police leadership, or like Cole talked about earlier, the leadership layer that's above us. Demand more of us as the people, and understand that like we all just saw this past summer, like we just saw from the outcome in that trial, ultimately the people are still in power, and police officers are still only supposed to be representative of those people. So don't give away your power. And that's what I thought was so beautiful about the whole entire movement, because I'm a protester from way back. Like I had my first protest when I was in high school, shut down my entire high school. People that know me know that. So I thought that was a beautiful thing, because it was people exercising their civic right in a orderly and beautiful manner, without any destruction. I mean, where there's no destruction, where there was no crime, where it was their voices, it was coming together, and it was people saying that they were going to change things through legislation. I'm always for that. So continuing to know that the people do have power, continuing to hold your leadership accountable, because the the troops, the line staff are going to go where you are going to follow and go where you lead them. And then lastly, the piece that I also want to make sure is never lost in translation is occupying the roles. If you want to see a change, if you want to see different results, if you want to see it done in a different way, you got to do it from the inside. You got to do it by occupying those roles. You have to do it by stepping up, become those, occupy those spaces, get into those cars, you put on the uniforms, change things, reform things the way you want to see it, but do it from the inside by showing people that it can be done differently. It can be done in a different way. So I continue to say, while we're rallying, send some of those young people to step up and get into government, get into police work, become the attorneys, go to the hospitals, become the doctors. If we inherently say there's a problem with how Black and brown people are treated in the hospital by the current clinicians, then occupy the role of clinician and treat your people better.
Cole, and then Bill, we'll hear what you guys have to say to suggest fixing on bridging the gap.
Sure. So a lot was said and very, very good points made. I agree with the commissioner. I think that in any profession or in the world, if you want to see something change, you have to be the change you want to see in the world. I will say, though, that there is a deep fear of, and I'm sure you've seen it, Commissioner Hagir, I'm sure you've seen it, Heather, I'm sure you've seen it, of Black and brown bodies getting involved in law enforcement because of that break of trust, because of that lack of understanding of what we're saying of be the change, because there is that initial fear of law enforcement in general. I'll give an example of a story. I was protesting. It was the BLM protest that drew thousands of people to Harrisburg. And we were at Front and Forester Street, and it was peaceful. Everyone was doing a wonderful job. And one person in the crowd just decided to throw a brick at one of the cop cars. And some of us protesters actually formed a line in front of the Harrisburg police officers because we didn't want to see them get hurt. But what ensued was the state police arriving, and without that understanding that one person did this, not everyone, started pepper spraying and macing all of us and hitting us with our batons. And I was hit directly in the face. I got hit with a baton multiple times by a state trooper, and heard him say under his breath, "Oh, I've been waiting all week for this." So, I think that that fear is very prevalent, and we are, we're fighting for equity and justice, but sometimes, and Commissioner, you referenced this, it's the unions that are the most powerful in stifling that justice and that accountability being achieved. And one in particular is the FOP, the Fraternal Order of Police. I know that when these two pieces of legislation were in front of the Pennsylvania legislature, they were fighting very hard for it not to happen. And especially there was one other piece of legislation that never made it onto the floor, which is a banning of chokeholds. And the FOP, and I know this from talking with some of the elected officials, actually, I don't want to say threatened, but lobbied some elected officials to not even take up that piece of legislation. So I think that that's also a very important point. And since I know we're over time, so other people can talk, I guess I'll give my kind of closing remarks. We are very, the George Floyd the verdict of Derek Chauvin, was a spark. It was a little light of hope in something I think will continue in this country. It will continue because of police officers like Commissioner Muldrow. It will continue with activists like Hagir, myself, Heather, Bill, continuing having these conversations but continuing understanding that we need to achieve a place of passing, legislation and holding our leadership accountable to get those done. And my last point, in front of Congress right now is HR 7120, which is the George Floyd Justice Act. It's been on the Senate's desk for months. The House passed it. It's still on the Senate's desk. And I would implore anyone who's watching to call Senator Toomey, call Senator Casey, and encourage them to get that legislation passed. It will lower the criminal intent standard. It will also limit qualified immunity as a defense liability. And it also authorizes the Department of Justice to issue subpoenas in investigations against police departments. And it also makes lynching a federal hate crime. So this is really important legislation. And I would implore anyone watching here from Pennsylvania or wherever you're from, even internationally, give our senators a call, because we need your help too. That would be, we can do this, and we can do this as a community, but we need to keep these conversations going. And I'm committed as a BLM leader to working with you, Commissioner, and other elected officials, especially in the Democratic Party, to make sure we see these systemic problems become non-issues for future generations in this country.
Bill
Beautiful.
and
Well
Heather.
said. Yeah, Bill, do you want to give us kind of your wrap up? Kind of let us know exactly what you want people to walk away remembering.
I just think what we need to do is look to the seed of the problem, where everything all started going wrong, and see what could be done to unravel that and start on a foundation of trust. The biggest problem is the lack of trust between the community and police officers. This lack of trust has created police officers to feel defensive. That kind of defensive feeling has, resulted in much of their abusive behaviors, because they feel like they are, being attacked. So, starting with working on education programs, unraveling some of the old laws that have not served their purpose. I know there was a bit of discussion on these laws that favor police officers and how they're supposed to, help in reduce incidents of police officers being assaulted and such. The statistics show that has not worked. Deterrence does not work. In fact, there's more police officers assaulted, and it doesn't produce the results it's aimed to do. In fact, it has only produced animosity between the public, and the cost of it has greatly outweighed any benefit that it may have had.
Heather.
Well said. I appreciate that view. Commissioner, why don't you kind of give us your wrap up? I appreciate all of your insights. The fact that you could be here today kind of helped us all see instead of suppose what your life is like. So give us a little bit of a wrap up. Let people know exactly what you want them to take away from the conversation.
I guess if I had to elevator speech it and just say one thing, for the community, for my colleagues in law enforcement, people that wear badges, and for the public in general, I would probably just say that I think for me, and what I'm going to continue to do as long as I'm in this role, as long as I have the breath to advocate, is when you know people, you're going to be more likely to care as police officers. And when the people know you, they're going to be more likely to trust. So that's my approach, that's my take, and that's the thing that I think I uniquely bring to the table, at least here in my hometown.
Wonderful. You guys have been absolutely incredible. That was an insightful, intelligent, nuanced conversation, and having the point of views from all of you is very much appreciated. We appreciate your time. We hope that everyone at home can take something from this conversation. If you've got questions, leave them in the comments. We can always do it together. I'm sure everyone here would come back for another show. And yeah, just take some of this stuff. It was really authentic and profound. Take it and try to apply it in your own life. And we will continue the conversation.
Yes, thank you all for coming and watching, and appreciate you give us more than the hour that we asked for. Thank you.